Because one of the occupational hazards of being a contemplative speaker is that I do get in the zone. And when I get in the zone, I get quiet. So one of the things I'm going to ask right now is that if I get quiet, that at least one or two of you misbehave. So the thumb, the ascending thumb is very helpful. So that will be wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, let's see what we've got here. After the little story about the Franciscan and the Jesuit yesterday, my wife and I spent not a little bit of time trying to figure out what joke I could open with. And I narrowed it down to about 4. But I'm not going to tell you 4 jokes. So let's see which one comes up first. And I don't even remember what my next screen is. What is my next screen? That's my next screen, but we're not going to go there yet. Okay. So I think I'll follow the Jesuit Franciscan theme. So the same Jesuit and the same Franciscan that we're talking about, the Maserati and the Novenas, they were buddies, and they were out driving around one day, and something happened, and they had a terrible accident, and they were both killed. And so they come back to consciousness, and they are standing in front of the pearly gates. And so the Jesuit is kind of 2 steps ahead of the Franciscan. And so he's the first one to get to the pearly gates. And he gets to the pearly gates, and suddenly there is a fanfare. The angels are singing, light is shining from the Empyrean, and the door opens, and out walks all the great saints of the Jesuit order, Francis Xavier and Teilhard de Chardin and Jean-Pierre de Caussade and Pedro Arrupe and many, many other great Jesuits from past and present. And they all walk out and they're hugging the Jesuit. And then after them come the apostles, come Bartholomew and Thomas and John, of course, and Peter. They're all hugging him, this big giant group hug. And then there's another fanfare, and out comes the Blessed Mother, and with her, her son Jesus, and they're hugging him, and everybody is cheering and cheering, and they all bring the Jesuit in, and the door slams shut right in front of the Franciscan's face. And then a little door to the side opens up, and this one little friar walks out with his brown habit, and he walks up and he says, "Oh, welcome, we're so glad you're here." And the friar said, "Wait a minute." He said, "The Jesuit got Cecil B. DeMille. This was Skywalker Ranch. And all I get is you." And he says, "Listen, we don't get very many Jesuits." So I am since this is being recorded, I am an affiliate spiritual director with the Jesuit Retreat House here in Atlanta. So hopefully I will, not anymore. No, the Jesuits will be laughing louder than any. So there you go. There you go. So I am having time anxiety. But I think if I do the slides first, then I'm going to have to rush through the meditation. So we're going to lead with the meditation, and then if I have to rush through the slides, so be it. So what I would like to do is go ahead, and we've got a pretty little icon here to set the mood. And so I just want to, and if any of you are familiar with Ignatian spirituality, you will see the thumbprints on what we're about to do. I won't say any more than that. But I just want to invite you and people in internet land, I'll try to remember to look at the camera, to find your comfortable place. I encourage you, as you are willing and able, everything that I am to ask of you is always as you are willing and able. And I forgot one thing, and I do want to say that. I don't know if you led with the land acknowledgement, but I think land acknowledgements are really important. We are on Muskogee land that was snookered out of the Muskogee people through an unfair treaty. And then, for those of you who are not from Metro Atlanta, about 20 miles from here is the headwaters of the Trail of Tears. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the violence that was done in this land, and to acknowledge the amazing grandmothers and grandfathers who lived here, who were custodians of this place for so many generations. We are grateful to stand on your land. Okay, back to the meditation. So let's be present, and let's trust the Spirit who resides in our hearts. And if you don't necessarily believe that the Spirit resides in your heart, I'm going to ask you for the next 20 minutes or so to be open to the possibility. To be open to the possibility that in the chambers of your heart is that which moves the sun and the other stars. That within the chambers of your heart like a chalice, has been poured infinite love. You are the custodian of infinite love. And that hopefully, as I lead you on this brief meditation journey, we can allow that love to guide our imagination and to meet us and to direct us in ways that may surprise us and enlighten us. Ooh, that was fun. There we go. So, with your eyes closed as you are willing and able, I invite you to enter into the theater of your imagination. So I invite you to come with me and imagine that we are present with Jesus of Nazareth and his followers. We are present as disciples, as companions, as co-conspirators. During his ministry, where he's traveling from town to town, before he takes that final trip to Jerusalem. And on this particular night, he has spent the day spreading the message of divine love and grace and infinite mercy, bringing that supernatural grace and bodily healing to those he met wherever he went. But now the day is growing long and the sun is setting, and so the companions have found a place to camp. And so all the disciples are busy setting up their camps, and they're lighting fires and preparing their evening meal. You just notice out of the corner of your eye that Jesus is over to the side speaking with Peter and James and John. But your eyes catch his, and he smiles, and he gestures for you to come with them. And so you walk with Jesus and his three closest friends, and you all leave the encampment and you begin to climb the nearby mountain. Notice what this feels like. Notice the exertion in your bones as you climb. Notice the kindness in Jesus' eyes as he waits for you and the other disciples to catch up with him. Notice what it feels like to be with Jesus in this intimate setting. So you climb, and eventually you reach the top of this mountain. You may need to take a moment or two to catch your breath. That's okay. But I invite you to pay attention, for almost immediately, Jesus begins to pray. So let us notice Jesus at prayer. Notice the expression on his face. Is he standing? Is he sitting? Is he kneeling? How is he holding his arms, his hands? Are his eyes open or closed? Trust your imagination to guide you now. Be present with the Nazarene in prayer. And I invite you to calibrate your own heart so that your prayer resonates with his as we take a moment of silence. And as you gaze upon Jesus' face, so subtle at first, but then so unmistakable, you will notice a miracle. The appearance of his face begins to change. It begins to shine like the sun. And even his clothes become dazzling white, whiter than anyone could ever bleach. Gaze upon Jesus as he is transfigured. And notice how you react. Notice how you receive and respond as he glows. Notice what you are feeling and what thoughts may be dancing through your mind. Be present in the light of Christ. Thanks to this radiance now emanating from the Christ, you are engulfed in an ocean of light. You remember Jesus proclaiming that he was the light of the world, and now these words carry new meaning for you. No longer just thoughts, now they are embodied reality. And you also remember his saying to you and to all the disciples, all the companions, that you are the light of the world. You are not different from the Christ. Ponder the meaning of these words. Ponder what it means to be immersed in this ocean of light. And if you can, through your imagination, discern the light that shines from within you. You are created from stardust after all. Perhaps even in the most ordinary of times, you are simply light captured in material form. But now you are immersed in the light of Christ, and you notice your own light is seeking to respond. Like a candle burning in the sun. Let your light shine in resonance with the infinite light of the transfigured Christ. And if you need to, in your mind's eye, shield or squint your eyes so that you can continue to gaze upon him, even in this brilliant radiance. As your eyes rest on his lovely countenance, notice that he now has two companions. Even though you have never seen them before, in your heart, you realize that these two apparitions are great figures from the sacred tradition. Moses, the one who liberated the people from slavery, and Elijah, the one who speaks the word of prophecy. Notice how these two interact with Christ, how these two bask in the radiance. Are they also beings of light? Reflect on the luminous play here between Jesus and his friends. And then you notice they are speaking with one another. I invite you to listen with your mind's ear, to listen with what Benedict called the ear of your heart, to what they are saying. They speak about what will happen in Jerusalem and about what is to come. But listen carefully and see if there is anything else that they speak of, anything that might be especially for you. Listen to the silent words of the Christ. Meanwhile, you notice your companions, Peter and James and John. They look like they're kind of sleepy. It has been a long day. But the glory of the bright light and the remarkable apparition of Moses and Elijah capture their attention. Look at Peter and James and John. Notice how they react to this miracle. Does the expressions on their faces surprise you? Can you tell how they are feeling? How does their reaction to the Transfiguration form and shape your own? Continue to notice whatever it is that you are feeling right now. And it seems like Moses and Elijah are preparing to leave when suddenly Peter blurts out, "Teacher, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah." It seems like Peter's voice is quavering. But as he speaks, a cloud appears and overshadows the mountaintop. Notice what it feels like to enter the cloud. So how does the light and the mist meet each other? How do they interact? And how do they change and transform one another? Continue to pay attention to your feeling and your response. And I invite you to consider that this too is a way of praying. Be present with the cloud and the light in the silence. And now from the cloud emerges a voice. And the voice says, "This is my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. Listen. Listen to him." How does that voice land in your heart, in your body, in your mind? How are you responding to that voice? Again, any thoughts, any feelings, any insights? How does this voice call to you? So friends, take it all in. Just take it all in. Feel the cool mist of the cloud. Notice how the light of Jesus' radiance meets the foggy mists. Notice the limitation on your vision, the limitation on your hearing. Ponder that voice. And now you notice that Peter and James and John have fallen to the ground. What about you? How are you responding? What's the invitation here? What's the call? What is the hope and the possibility that meets you in this moment? And Jesus comes to each of the disciples and he says, get up, do not be afraid. And now he approaches you, and you are face to face with the Nazarene, face to face with the face that glows like the sun. What does he say to you? What is his body language? What are his words of wisdom? What do his eyes say at a level deeper than words? What meaning is fostered in your heart? And after what seems to be eternity, or what seems to be just a few moments, the miracle seems to pass. You and your companions look up, and you see only Jesus, Jesus in the dusk. Perhaps there is still the faintest glow in his eyes or in his face, which you notice there in the darkening twilight. He beckons to the four of you back to the path down the mountain. It is time to leave and return to your friends who are camped below. And as you walk down the mountain, Jesus speaks. He instructs you to be discreet about what you have seen. He says to tell no one about this until after the resurrection, whatever that means. Does he say anything else? Does he have a message especially for you? Let's take a moment of silence and listen. The other disciples start to ask Jesus questions about Moses and Elijah, questions about John the Baptist. And as you listen to them, notice if you have any questions for the Christ. What would you ask him? What do you want to know or want him to know? What do you ache to hear from his lips? Imagine asking Jesus your question and imagine his reply for you and you alone. Friends, I invite you to prayerfully interact with Jesus. And soon your small party returns to the camp. And you notice that Peter and James and John, normally a pretty gregarious bunch, have fallen silent. Jesus said to say nothing. Could it be that he has asked you to be silent? So I invite you now to take a few moments and simply be silent in the divine presence. You do not need to come up with clever thoughts or heartfelt words. My friends, I invite you to simply be still and to let the stillness be your prayer. Still holding that silence in your heart, you take your evening meal with your loved ones. And as the fires are getting lower and lower and the embers are glowing, Jesus comes to you and he pulls you aside. It's late, but he invites you to sit in front of some glowing embers. Almost dark, just the simple light of the last little flames dancing on his face and your face. He sits close to you and he gazes into you with his eyes almost unblinking. And so you meet that gaze, even though you have an uncanny sense that you are gazing into the abyss of eternity. Friends, hold Jesus' gaze. Let the Christ look at you and meet that look with a gaze of your own. And after what seems like several long minutes, in which it seems as if the two of you are only communicating at a level too deep for words, far below the threshold of ordinary consciousness, he asks you a series of questions. So I invite you to give each of these questions your complete attention, to allow your attention to meet and receive his attention as he speaks to you. Let the silence between the words be your teacher. Let the depth of those eyes locked in intimate gaze with yours also be your teacher. You do not need words or concepts to learn from the Christ. Let your imagination guide you in the instructions that you are being given. So Jesus slowly and gently and tenderly whispers your name. Consider the intimacy of this moment as your name dances across the Christ's lips with the tenderness of a soft spring breeze. I invite you to savor the intimacy of that moment. And again, he whispers your name, and then he asks, my friend, my beloved, where do you hurt? Where do you hurt? Consider this question in its fullness. If you have any kind of bodily ache or ailment, this is your invitation to share it with Jesus. But don't just stop with your physical aches and pains. What traumas or disappointments or deep frustrations do you carry in your heart? Where do the walls of depression and anxiety hem you in? Do you have a sense of limiting beliefs or a deeply lodged cynicism that corrodes your capacity for complete spiritual freedom? Do you hurt in terms of your lack of trust, lack of faith? Or perhaps you carry a deep-seated mistrust of the divine, shaped no doubt by the way humans have let you down. Are you struggling with an image of God that is wrathful or capricious rather than merciful and compassionate? I invite you to take some time to scan your heart, scan your mind, your gut, your soul. Wherever you hurt, share that in the theater of your interior silence, openly and vulnerably with the Logos who loves you infinitely. After a long pause, he whispers your name a second time, and now he asks, my friend, what do you want? What do you really really deep in your heart want. Perhaps you may feel you need to take some time with this one. Consider the entire spectrum of your desire. Physical, but especially spiritual. If you stay awake at night worrying about a relationship or about money, there's probably some sort of a humble want in there. Try to find a way to share that desire with Christ. But remember that in asking you what you really, really want, he is inviting you to go deeper and deeper and deeper still. What does your heart desire? What longings are coiled deep within your belly? How do needs and desires and wants form the very foundation of your soul? My friend, consider the vast possibilities as you have been asked to declare your longings, your yearning, your wants. World peace, union with God, unlimited spiritual bliss and insight. Find what is yours and hold nothing back as you share with the one who gazes lovingly into your eyes. And one more time, your name almost silently dances and breathes through Jesus' quietest whisper. And again, your eyes are held in a mutual gaze with his. My friend, he says, what sacrifice are you willing to make? The grace of God may be freely given, but only rarely is it freely received. We all find at various points in our life journey that there is a price to pay, a choice to make, a pleasure or ambition to release, an addiction to recover from, a sacrifice where our smaller graspings pour out in a gesture of generosity into the ocean of divine purpose. You realize that your ability to receive your heart's deepest desire will be, at least to some extent, shaped by the letting go that your joyful and free sacrifice makes possible. Christ is inviting you to empty your cup so that you may receive. Consider what you can most cheerfully give to him. Jesus receives each of your three answers without commentary or criticism, no judgment and no shame. He knows that you are casting a spell of intention by simply answering his questions. Whether your suffering and desire and sacrifice are large or small, momentary or life-defining, you recognize that your willingness to respond to his invitation will change you forever. Friends, I invite you to pray gently and silently so that you know exactly what you are making yourself available for and to. Let us sit now once again in a moment of silence before we bring this prayer to our conclusion. My brothers and sisters and friends, the time has come now to conclude this, our time of imaginative prayer. There is no need for us to say goodbye to Jesus or to the Spirit, since they remain always in our hearts. So I invite you simply to allow your imagination to rest, so that we may simply once again be present in our bodies here and now in this place. Friends, rest gently. And I invite you to let that process take the time it needs to take. And only when you are ready, I invite you to gently open your eyes and simply be present in this place here and now. If you need to stretch, stretch. If you need to yawn, yawn. Let us be grounded in our bodies, and let that feeling of groundedness be our amen. One of my mentors was a theologian of the Church of England named Kenneth Leach. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He died about 10 years ago. Ken was a lovely man. He was from Manchester and had that beautiful Mancunian accent, very rich, kind of a baritone voice. One time he was here in Atlanta, and I took him out for breakfast. And it was when I was writing the big book of Christian Mysticism, and I shared that I was writing that book. Guess what, Ken? I'm writing a book on mysticism. And we talked a little, and he was very supportive. But at one point he said, and I cannot do a Mancunian accent, although I'll try, but, be kind. He basically said, now, Carl, one thing you must not do, you must not ever call yourself a mystic. He said, Carl, that's like calling yourself a saint or a shaman. It just isn't done. And then he said, I challenge you to be a mystic, and then let other people decide what they will or won't call you. Those words have stayed with me, however many years it's been. But I noticed there was a loophole in there. I could not call myself a mystic, but I could tell other people they're mystics. So friends, as we go through the slides, and forgive me, because I do want to honor the schedule. So I am going to kind of clip through the slides. But we'll make the slides available, so you'll have them. But I want to invite you to watch these slides, trusting that you are truly a custodian of the mysteries. That your heart has access to silence and light and mystery that makes you one with the universe. And that's all I'm going to say right now. Let's just zip on through. There's some silly stuff in these slides, so hope you enjoy. Karl Rahner, Jesuit. Now, there's a Jesuit. Oh my goodness. I'm sure when he got to heaven, they had the brass band and all that. Says in 1965, I think it was 65 or 66, 60 years ago now, he says the Christian of the future will be a mystic or will not exist at all. So I normally swim in mainstream Christian waters. It's really a lot of fun to be hanging out with the Gnostic community, because I can kind of let my freak flag fly a little bit more than I normally do. So oftentimes I'm speaking to a group of Presbyterians or Episcopalians or Catholics or whatever, and people who are kind of scared of mysticism. They're kind of afraid it's going to bite them or whatever. So part of my job is to kind of say, it's okay. You know, so this crowd is like, hey, I want to jump in the deep end of the pool. But I would like to suggest, I don't know about where you all live, but here in Atlanta is the buckle of the Bible Belt. Here in Atlanta, I live down in Clarkston near Decatur. Churches are closing all the time. You see a church, then you see a little sign that says, we are now worshiping at Rehoboth Baptist up the street. And then a month later, all the windows are boarded up. And a month later, the wrecking ball shows up. And a year after that, there's a Subway or a Target or a Walmart or whatever. It happens again and again and again. So what I take that to mean is that the warning part of Ronner's statement is already come to pass. My friends, Ronner is saying the Christian of today must be a mystic, or you may as well just take your marbles and go home. And I would also argue that that's not just for Christians. So this is my friend David Hamilton. He was the organist at my mom and dad's Lutheran church. And I had a scary dream right after I graduated from high school, a dream about the world coming to an end. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But David was about 10 years older than me, so he was a bit of a mentor. So this is what David looks like today. But back then, he was long, looked like John Lennon, like Abbey Road John Lennon, long hair, big beard, I mean, he introduced me to all sorts of weird substances. He was the one. But this particular day, I tell him about this dream, and he says, I have a book for you. And he goes to his bookcase, and he hands me this book, Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. I imagine many of you are familiar with this book and have probably read it. Now, I'm telling this story to you because number one, it's a story, isn't it? I just told you how I got introduced to this crazy subject, mysticism. I think before that, I had heard the word. I was in my high school English class, and we were studying William Blake. And my teacher said, oh, yeah, and William Blake was a mystic. And we were all like, well, what's that? It's like, oh, he had visions. I mean, that was the definition. So then I got this book, and I read it, and it was kind of like when a hippie friend of mine went to his first Grateful Dead concert, and he said, where have you people been all my life? This is my tribe. That's how I felt when I read that book. But friends, here's what I want to suggest to you. I bet if time allowed, we could go around and every one of us would have a story about a David in our lives. And we probably all have a story about a book or a library or whatever, or nowadays a podcast, a blog, a movie. Hold this idea of mysticism and story together. Hold this. Introduce you to another person from my past. This is a gentleman named Jeffrey Hammond. Jeffrey, winner of the Pushcart Prize more than once. Jeffrey's kind of an award, he's kind of a cool dude. He was my master's thesis advisor. I got my master's degree in professional writing and editing at George Mason University up in Virginia. And Jeff, again, he looked a lot younger, but I looked a lot younger too. But in my first class with him, it was just a basic, nonfiction writing 101. And he stood up there and he said to us, I don't care what kind of writing you're doing, if it's poetry, if it's prose, if it's science fiction, I don't care what it is, or you're just writing a government report, because this was in Fairfax, Virginia. So I think Brad is from the DC area. So you know where George Mason is. So your son goes, so there you go. Yeah, Jeff's not there. Jeff's retired now. But I remember at 21, 22 years old, I was scandalized. I wasn't there to learn to write fiction. I would have gone to Iowa if I wanted to write fiction. I was there to learn how to write nonfiction. Well, friends, in the 45 years since then, I have increasingly come to see, well, boy, isn't Jeff right? All writing is fiction. So I want you to hold that. But you may be sitting there thinking, all writing is fiction? All writing is fiction? You mean the Bible is fiction? You mean the Tao? You mean the Gita? You mean, Plotinus, for God's sake? Teresa of Avila? Julian of Norwich? The Dhammapada? That can't all be fiction. Can it? Can it? Can it? Not Starhawk. Not Starhawk. Oh my God. I love Starhawk. She almost made a witch out of me. Almost. So here's what I would like to suggest. Is that if the word fiction freaks you out a little, replace that with the word story. That all speech tells a story. All writing and all discourse are invitations for us to access our imagination. not the realm of make-believe. And any of you I know there's been some discussing, somebody's doing a program, I think here in Atlanta, doing a program on Neoplatonism, is that right? So, all right, yeah. One of the things, you get into Iamblichus and some of those freaky guys, and the first thing, it will totally revolutionize your understanding of imagination. And if you practice Ignatian spirituality like I do, it'll totally freak you out, but that's another story for another day. All right, I've got to make some changes. So here's a furry convention. I don't know, maybe we have some furries in the room, but you don't have to tell us if you are. I was gonna do just a picture from DragonCon. That's the big science fiction convention here in Atlanta, where one year I saw a Pepto-Bismol colored Darth Vader. It was a mystical experience. I thought I was caught up to the sixth heaven. It was just amazing. But you don't have any furries. This is a safe place, friends. Let your inner furry shine. But this picture had a Creative Commons license, so this is the one I ended up using. I'm not a furry myself, but I'm very furry friendly. What can I say? So, but the thing is, I have friends who spent all year working on their costumes for DragonCon. All year. These people do amazing costumes. I'm the kind of guy, if I show up in a Star Trek uniform, that's a good day for me. But, it's just stories, science fiction. One year I said to my wife, I think I want to go as Dr. Strange, because I have a Benedict Cumberbatch fetish anyways. And I go there and there's like 40 Dr. Stranges walking around. I'm like, oh, well, glad I'm just in a t-shirt. If people can give their lives to stories that we all consensually acknowledge are simply entertainment. Again, no judgment. I'll nerd out on Star Trek in fact, if we can get all the way through the ends of the slides, I've got some fun slides for you. But yeah, it's a story. My wife and I love Call the Midwife, that show on PBS. It's a story. It was based on a true story, but the first 2 seasons, now they're in season 14. It's all fiction. But here's the reality, isn't it? Isn't the reality that if we can find so much meaning out of stories that were written to entertain us, what does that say for the stories that were written to ennoble us on a mythical level? Stories make a real difference in people's lives. They blur the line between fiction and reality. If you don't believe that's so, go to DragonCon and just start talking to folks. If a story matters to someone, they might give their life to it, or at least their free time. And we use stories not just to entertain us, but to give us a sense of meaning, of community, of purpose, and of identity. The people I know who are hardcore DragonCon people, their lives revolve around that. So this is one of the points that I make in my writing, and that I really want to invite you to reflect on for your own journey. To what extent is my relationship with the mystery built on story? How does story introduce me to the mystery, and how does story inform the mystery as it lands in my body? I'm going to blow through these next few slides because I'm conscious of time. So just a few stories for you. Thomas Aquinas, on my birthday, December 6th, so y'all can send me cards, December 6th, 1273, not my actual birthday, I'm not that old, but a few years before me. It was also Evelyn Underhill's birthday, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think it was Dion Fortune's too. So December 6th, it's a kick-ass birthday, man. If you're up there for your next incarnation, you get to choose December 6th. Trust me, it's great. December 6th, 1273, he is saying Mass, and he comes back to his chambers afterwards, and his amanuensis, his secretary, Brother Reginald, is sitting there ready with his wax tablet, ready to keep working on the Summa Theologia. And Aquinas says, no, I'm sorry, I'm done. What? I'm done. He said, what do you mean? And he said, I just had a mystical experience. I elevated the host, and I saw something, and when I saw that, everything I've written is like straw. Everything I've written is like straw. Sure enough, he died 3 months later. He was done. But then let's talk about Julian of Norwich. About 100 years later, not quite to the day, but 1273, 1373, she's probably, we don't know for sure, but she's probably certainly a lay woman, because they didn't ordain women, very pious, had a very important faith, important to her, probably was like the family bookkeeper or something like that. She says she was unlettered, but what she means by that is she didn't know Latin. She didn't know, philosophy. But she could write a book. She gets sick. They think she's going to die. The priest comes in and administers the sacrament of last rites. A couple of days later, she's hanging on there. The priest is back. He holds up a crucifix. He says, "Gaze upon your Lord so that he may comfort you while you die." Which is kind of a creepy thing for him to say, but hey, but then she looks at that and it's like she snaps into non-ordinary consciousness and she has 16 visions, boom, 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 over a 24-hour period. And what does she do? She comes out of those visions, lo and behold, she gets better, she convalesces, she moves into a life of solitude, and she's the first woman to write a book in the English language. Now, isn't this funny? Mysticism makes Aquinas put down his pen, and it makes Julian pick up hers. Wonder what that's all about. Just a couple of quick 20th century stories. Carol Houselander, British lay Catholic woman. She has a vision of Christ as a Russian Orthodox icon over the skies of London. And she goes home that evening to hear the news that the Tsar had been assassinated. And then a few days later, she's on the London Underground, and she just suddenly pops into non-ordinary consciousness, and she looks at everybody on the train, and she says they all looked like Christ. Every one of them, their face was Christ. She goes on to become probably the most popular British Catholic writer of the 20th century. And I could easily spend the next half hour grooving on the incredible mystical depth. But again, we have a lot of ground to cover, so you can check her out on your own time. Then there's Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman, who went to college here in Atlanta. He's from Daytona Beach, Florida. He is interred, his ashes are interred at Morehouse College here in Atlanta. People ask me, they're like, how can you live in Atlanta? And I was like, well, in what way am I a bad Atlantan? But I always say, well, if Martin Luther King and Howard Thurman could decide to hang out here for eternity, I can spend the next 20 years here. So that's kind of my thinking. But Howard Thurman, who when he was a boy in Jim Crow South, and his family was trying to get him an education because the local schools in Daytona Beach wouldn't educate African Americans beyond the 11th grade, basically trying to keep them from ever having a hope of going to college. So the family makes arrangement for him to go to Jacksonville, Florida, just up the coast, to get some private tutoring so he can then go to college. And he gets to the train station, and the stinking racist ticket taker tells him that he has to check his trunk because his trunk wasn't properly tied. And the cost it was gonna cost him was more money than he had. And of course, the man had no sympathy for this teenage black boy. He sits down and he starts crying. And then another man walks up to him, and the man says, "Son, why are you crying?" And he tells him, and the man says, why do you need to go to Jacksonville? And he tells him, and the man says, "If you have a chance at a better life than me, I will buy you that ticket." And he goes over and he buys the ticket, hands it to the boy, and the boy is pulling it to the train, and he turns around to thank the man, and the man cannot be seen. Nowhere can he be seen. Howard Thurman goes on to be a mentor to Martin Luther King Jr., having studied with Gandhi in India, probably was the architect of the nonviolent resistance of the 60s civil rights movement. His influence, absolutely incalculable. For my money, an angel came in to help him in his moment of need. And then finally, most of you probably know the story of Thomas Merton, Trappist monk, who after 17 years in the monastery, one day he goes to Louisville, Kentucky on a business trip. Monks don't just decide, oh, I want to go see a new movie, let's go see Conclave. No, monks have to have a reason to leave the monastery. Well, he had to go to Louisville, Kentucky, which is an hour north of his monastery, to get some printing done. So he goes there, and Merton himself doesn't drive, so somebody drives him up there and drops him off in downtown Louisville. The driver goes off to do whatever he's going to do. Merton is walking along. He comes to a street corner, and as he puts it, he falls in love with everybody. And he says, they are all shining like the sun. They are all shining like the sun. If you know Merton's writing, you can see that was 1958, March of 1958. He dies in 1968. His first book was published in 1948, so right in the middle of his literary career. His writing can be divided into early Merton and later Merton. Early Merton is all kind of like garden variety, pious Catholic stuff. It's okay. But late Merton, he just cracks open the world, and he's writing about Zen Buddhism and Sufism and the civil rights movement and the protest against nuclear weapons, and how do we bring the deep medieval spirituality of the Trappists into the 21st century. And it all seems to start on that day when he fell in love with everybody shining like the sun. So my point is, friends, that these are all stories, aren't they? These are all stories that they themselves told. Obviously, I never met any of them. Merton was the only, well, Thurman too. They were the only ones still alive when I was born. Just, Merton died when I was 8, Thurman when I was about 21. So I don't know any of those people, but I know their words. I know their books. I know some of their stories. And each one of those stories has made my heart sing. So you've probably seen books with titles like The Body Keeps the Score, Your Body Believes Every Word You Say, Write It Down, Make It Happen. So once again, I want to challenge you that your story can become the blueprint of your own mystical union with the divine. Don't be afraid to tell yourself the story of what is possible. Meister Eckhart, great German mystical theologian, Dominican priest from the late 12th, early 13th century, or it could be 13th, 14th, I can't remember, basically says the nature of a word is to reveal what is hidden. The nature of a word is to reveal what is hidden. So I'd like to suggest that every word we ever speak or write or even think carries within it a universe of possibility. Every word carries within it a universe of possibility. But it gets even more complicated than that. And I don't know, I'm probably the oldest person in the room, but a few of you look like you might be similar to me. So here is a pop culture quiz. This is a band that was popular in the 1960s. It was called Jefferson Airplane. I see a few people smiling. They were like the architects of the San Francisco sound. And if you probably are more familiar with Jimi Hendrix and Grateful Dead. Well, Jimi Hendrix and Grateful Dead probably would not have existed without Jefferson Airplane. Really, really major band. They released 2 albums in 1967. The first one was called Surrealistic Pillow, and it had big hits on it. Songs like Somebody to Love and White Rabbit. I mean, songs that still get played on classic rock stations or channels. And then they go into the studio, so suddenly they're superstars, not on the cover of Life magazine and all that kind of stuff. They go into the studio and they spend 6 months in the studio, and then they release an album, and the album comes out and nobody knows what to make of it. It's cacophonous. The sound is weird. It's like tempo changes, random tempo changes. They sing out of key, for heaven's sake. The album is called After Bathing at Baxter's. After Bathing at Baxter's. Does anybody know what that means? Probably doesn't make any sense, does it? What could that possibly mean? Bathing at Baxter's was slang for taking LSD. Slang for taking LSD. So what Jefferson Airplane was basically did was they tried to record an LSD trip. Now, we can argue over a beer how successful they were. But here's what I would like to suggest, is that when you know that, your experience of that album will change. And so I just want to present to you this idea that every one of the mystics has their own Bathing at Baxter baked in. I'm not saying they're talking about LSD. But I am saying they're talking about something that, for my money, is probably even more powerful than LSD. But we don't always know the code. So we got that to play with, too. How are we doing on time? I know I'm supposed to have time for conversation. So mysticism, magic, theurgic. I'm going to blow through these because I think this crowd already knows what this stuff is. But magic, the art of changing consciousness at will. There's our sweet Dion Fortune. Isn't that the coolest picture? I just love that. I would have loved to have had dinner with her. There you go. Absolutely. There you go. Proclus, one of our Neoplatonist friends. Theurgy. What a mouthful of a word. A power higher than all wisdom. Embracing the blessings of divination. See, that's why I asked the question about divination. Yeah. The purifying powers of initiation. And in a word, all the operations of a divine possession. Ooh, divination, initiation, divine possession. 3 delicious rabbit holes. But again, we time. So, but let's talk about mysticism now. Evelyn Underhill, who I mentioned that book my friend David gave me, The Direct Intuition or Experience of God. A mystic is someone who, to a greater or lesser degree, has had such an experience, whose religion and life are centered on personal knowledge. It ain't just something we talk about, folks. It's something that's knit into our bones. And then dear Thomas Keating, the Trappist monk, talks about, and he said this up in Sewanee, which is just up the road from here. The Christian religion is primarily about a transformation of consciousness. The the art of changing consciousness at will, primarily about a transformation of consciousness, takes spiritual practice, the cultivation of wisdom, blah, 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 blah. He says the main thing is to be transformed into God. I can see all the people at EWTN, their heads exploding now. To be transformed into God, what the early church called deification, theosis, divinization. Now, as I put these slides together, I realized the people that I normally hang out with would all be freaking out because you're talking about magic. You're talking about theurgy, which sounds really weird. And I'm like, but just hanging out on yesterday online and today in person, I realized, man, you guys are beyond this. But there is this cultural angst about magic and mysticism. Like they don't mix. They're spy versus spy. And I think you can trace it back at least as far as Aquinas and probably further. And what does Aquinas do? He's a proto-scientist. He basically says, oh, magic, that's superstition. That's superstition. I think somebody yesterday said, what is superstition? It's superstition. Read Religion and the Still Enlightening, the social theory of magic, because that's where that idea comes from, absolutely. But then let's look at the great Valentin Tomberg, author of Meditations on the Tarot. Sacred magic is basically his word for theurgy, is the power of love, born of the union in love with the divine and human will. All right, conscious of time here. So I want to encourage, I thought I was going to kind of have to sell it, but you guys have already. Yeah. So this is great. So magic and mysticism, I believe they dance together. All right, like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Magic is the yang, mysticism is the yin. Magic is active, mysticism is receptive. Magic is acquired contemplation. Mysticism is infused contemplation. Magic is cataphatic, mysticism is apophatic. And again, I'm not going to define these terms because of time, but I invite you to play with them on your own. If you like the Heart Sutra, magic is form, mysticism is emptiness. Magic is Martha and mysticism is Mary. So their magic is saying, why does mysticism get to sit at your feet while I'm the one busy creating lunch? Magic is Fred, mysticism is Ginger. Magic is the heartbeat, mysticism is the silence after it. And building on the Fred and Ginger theme, you all know that line that originated apparently with Ginger herself. I did everything Fred did, only backwards and in heels. So is that what we mean when we say we are being invited into sacred magic? That we are being invited to dance backwards in heels? I don't care what your gender is, assigned or experienced. We are invited to dance backwards and in heels. But is it possible that we are also invited to be the Fred and the divine spirit? She dances or they dance backwards and in heels with us. I'll leave that for you to ponder. So magic versus mysticism, truth versus myth, intellect versus emotion. Are these all just fictions? All writing is fiction, right? Thank you, Jeff Hammond. We're almost out of time. So here's just very quickly from St. Clare of Assisi, the co-founder with St. Francis, the Franciscan tradition. She's writing to Blessed Agnes of Prague in the year 1238. And she's instructing her, and she's saying, place your mind before the mirror of eternity. Place your soul in the brilliance of glory. Place your heart in the figure of the divine substance, and transform your whole being into the image of the God itself through contemplation, so that you may feel what his friends feel as they taste the hidden sweetness which God himself has reserved from the beginning of those who love him. Friends, this is a spell, and all my beloved Catholic friends, their heads would explode to hear me say it. But you're going to put it on YouTube, so they can tell you. There you go. It is a spell. The mystical life invites us to speak our words of intention. And in speaking our words of intention, to trust that spirit in our heart, playing with our imagination, meeting us through our imagination, to weave that into some sort of possibility for our journey. I already alluded to this in the meditation. I am the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Merton, there's no way of telling people that they're all walking around shining like the sun. Compare that to the modern theurgical writer Gregory Shaw. who talks about following Iamblichus, the condition of becoming luminous, arrayed from head to toe with light, marks the soul's deification. Are we all carrying that in us? And the trick is we don't notice it. We are made of stardust after all. So to write a story, we need a blank screen, an empty page, a silent mind. So I just want to make a little pitch here for some sort of a practice of silence. And again, I'm really conscious of time. But you must bring, just at the end of this quote, you must bring back the sacred eye of your soul and extend an empty mind into that awareness to know it, for it exists beyond your mind. This is from the Chaldean oracles, kind of the mothership of theurgy. Psalm 65, almost every English translation of the Bible gets this wrong. But if you know, like you know just enough Hebrew to be dangerous, you'll know that translated literally, Psalm 65 says, "To you, O God, silence is praise." That to enter into silence is to worship the divine. To enter into silence is to worship the divine. The Yoga Sutras. Yoga is the settling of the mind into silence. And hey, I'm all for asanas, but the deeper yoga is there. Thomas Keating, I think you alluded to this, His Eminence, silence is God's first language, everything else a poor translation. And then John of the Cross, the Father spoke one word, which was the Son, and this word speaks always in eternal silence, and in silence must it be heard. So friends, I want to invite you to consider that silence is itself a story that we are invited to tell, but also to participate in. So you can see just some of the themes that we've touched on today: silence, light, mystery, consent. Consent is a big thing in the centering prayer world, that we're consenting to that spirit resonant within us, resident and resonant within us. So friends, if you were absolutely free, what would your story look like? Okay, I'm not going to go through the poems right now, but the slides will be made available to you. And I just encourage you, both of these poems, to one at the winter solstice and a green crab shell, to use them in your own Lectio practice. They'll take you some places. And then finally, one more: magic and mysticism. And what is your story? What is your story? Okay, so finally, just for fun, I had to get to these slides, just for fun. When we tell our own story, we get to write the rules, don't we? We get to write them. Now, I've got to tell my story in the context of everyone else's story, so that kind of creates some guardrails. I believe in community discernment and community norms and all that kind of stuff. But there's still this reality that when it's just me and God, I can kind of tell whatever story I want. And God might respond however God responds. But I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about Star Trek. I was thinking about Star Wars. I like them both. I've loved them both since I was kids. And I thought, is it possible for there to be a crossover? So let's imagine Star Trek with classical music and those big symphonic, the Captain Kirk encountering some sort of a god. That's like the mysticism of science fiction. Whereas Star Wars with the Jedi and the Sith and the lightsabers and the Force, that's kind of like the magic of science fiction. So what would happen if we brought Star Wars and Star Trek together? What would happen? Is it possible that Data and R2-D2 would kind of do some cool things together? Is that possible? Is that possible? And then finally, wouldn't Mr. Spock like to work with Princess Leia? So, courtesy of AI. Let's see, are there any? And that's it. I got through the slides and we have 8 minutes. And I'm going to hang around so we can, I think while we're recording, if anybody has a question they really want to play with, but we can carry the conversation onward. So, yes. Tell a story, absolutely.
I was teaching at McColman County College up in Crystal Lake, Illinois. And there were some people, some temp workers that had come in to do some, and one was she was really very passionate about her evangelical faith. When she found out that I was a priest. She wanted to know all about this. And she asked me, when did you hear the call? And my answer was about 5 years after I was ordained. And she was absolutely scandalized that I would accept ordination without having heard the call first. But I remember the moment when I heard the calls, when I was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, celebrating the liturgy for St. Michael's, the AJC, and there was one day when nobody showed up. And so I said Mass anyway. I remember coming to the prayer to the Blessed Lady, and I stopped dead and couldn't continue for probably about 10 or 15 minutes because I was just so overwhelmed with the magnitude of what I was doing. And that was the moment where I realized that I had actually become a priest.
Yeah.
And it was long after my ordination. So I think that we need to be prepared for these moments because we don't know when they're going to come.
And can I make a theological response? I would suggest that that was the moment when you truly became conscious of your priesthood. That your priesthood was at, the Spirit was deep at work within you, and at that moment, that amazing moment of tenderness and of possibility, you were just like, wow. I have to tell you this, and it's funny. I should have done it. I didn't bring any of my pagan books. I'm a trained monkey, and usually when I I love the Unitarians because when I speak for the Unitarians, they want all my books. But normally, if I speak at a place where there's Jesus or Christ in the title, I usually only bring my Christian books. But I actually have written a number of pagan books too, and I'll tell you, it is so much fun. Every now and then, I'll be invited somewhere to speak, and this little old lady walks up, and she's handy with Google. She is handy with Google. And she walks up and she says, "Are you the same Carl McColman that wrote all those books about Wicca?" And I say, "Well, yes, ma'am, I am." And see, you made me think when you said scandalized, because then I get scandalism kind of oohing all over me, and I kind of just sit there, and the question always comes down to this: why should I trust you? And my answer always is, well, I hope you trust yourself. And if my writing is helpful to you, then I hope you will enjoy it. And if my writing is not, your heart will tell you. So, thanks.
Thank you.
So.
Now, but surely we can do better than the Unitarians and buy out some books.